Welcome to the GSMC Car Podcast, the show that takes you on a journey to the automotive world. We talk about the latest news, from new makes and models to new technology to all of the must-have options available. Whether you're a fan of the old classics, love the latest models and technology, or have never met a vehicle you didn't want to work on, the GSMC Car Podcast has something for every car enthusiast.
Welcome to the GSMC Car Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, David Lucy Mabel. Okay, folks, today we have finally reached the end of our series on the most influential cars of each decade. We have been doing this probably since January. I hope you all had a happy Easter. There wasn't an episode for that for obvious reasons. But today we have finally gotten to our current decade, the present decade at hand, the 2020s, or otherwise known as the 2020s. So, as I said, when I got to the 2020s, I was going to predict which car, or frankly, which class of vehicles I believed was going to be the most influential vehicle of this time. And I will have to go with one that I did before, the GMC Hummer EV. And you will soon find out why. But to put it in short, the GMC Hummer EV is the first real entry into the electric pickup truck market that's actually viable, that's actually practical, and that actually is the furthest along in development, frankly. There's three electric trucks right now that are currently in development. You have got one called the Rivian that nobody's really heard of. You've got the Tesla Cybertruck, and you've got the GMC Hummer EV. And the GMC Hummer EV, of all of those, is the only one that is, close to production as far as having a working prototype and things of that sort. Doug DeMuro was able to review the working prototype. There's lots of things that the GMC Hummer EV has been able to do, even before it's officially been produced, that the other ones haven't gotten to yet. GMC, or GM in general, General Motors, is really leading the way as far as the electric pickup truck game goes. So, let's get started. I'm going to give you a recap on the history of the GMC Hummer EV. If you would like to hear that podcast, that would be podcast number 31, I believe, and that was way back in October that debuted. So you could look back in our history of podcasts and then find the one that's dedicated to the GMC Hummer EV. That's when it had just been announced, and that's when it was new. It's been around for a few months now. People have known about it, but it's going into production later on this year in 2021. So anyways, let me get started. So, the Hummer is back. Gone after an 11-year absence, no longer its own brand, but a model of GMC, as you all know. That's why I said GMC Hummer, not just plain old Hummer, because Hummer used to be its own brand. It's marketed as the world's first all-electric super truck. Now, we've heard of things that we would consider super trucks. Things like the Ford Raptor. The Ford Raptor is like a super truck. There are other things that are very high-performance pickup trucks and things of that sort that people would consider super trucks. The high-performance, pickup truck has not just now existed. It's been around for a while. There was a GMC Cyclone back in the 90s. There was a Ford SVT Lightnings. There was the Dodge Ram SRT-10. I can't think of anyone that Chevy made off the top of my head, but there were some high-performance pickup trucks that were meant more for high performance than anything. So those were like the predecessors to what is now known as the super truck. This is GM's pure branding. This is how they're marketing it. They're marketing it as a super truck. And we'll just have to find out what that means when we start seeing them out on the road. And if anybody has the opportunity and the privilege to test drive one of these to see how it handles and everything. So, according to GMC's website, the Hummer EV is loaded. There's so many different features. And the way they're planning on coming out with this, there's going to be the Edition 1 that comes out this year, and orders are already full for that. I've already looked on the website. And then there's the Edition, there's the EV2, there's the EV2 squared, and there's like the EV1, something along those lines. Basically it starts EV1, EV2, EV2 squared, and then Edition 1. Something along those lines. I believe that's how the branding and the trim levels go for it. But anyway, so according to GMC's website, the fully loaded models are going to have available crab walk. Allows the Hummer EV to drive diagonally. Get this, folks. A diagonally driving vehicle, let alone a pickup truck. An available extract mode. Available to lift the suspension by approximately 6 inches in order to get out of tight off-roading situations. Available Ultra Vision with underbody cameras so you can eye the trail underneath you as you are off-roading with the vehicle. And the fully loaded models will have a GM estimated 350 plus mile range. Can charge nearly 100 miles of range in 10 minutes. So think of it this way. If you're going to be charging this truck, 350 miles of range will only take you 30 minutes. Just about 35 minutes. This is revolutionary as far as car recharging goes. Recharging electric cars used to be like how long it took you to charge your phone, essentially. A few hours, you would have to leave it overnight, and then you would use it during the day, and then if you were lucky, you had a car that could do regenerative braking, in which it would return some electricity to the battery pack. Now we've got something that you can charge fully in less than an hour. Granted, it's not as ideal as a gas car in which you could just fill up in 5 minutes and be on your way. But let's say you're going on a road trip in your GMC Hummer EV. You know what? You could stop for lunch, conceivably, and plug this thing outside. And by the time you're done with lunch, your car is fully charged and ready to go on the next leg of your trip. That's very practical compared to other vehicles that came before this that were fully electric. The fully loaded model, which is the Edition 1 that will come out this year, 2021, has 1,000 horsepower with an astonishing 11,500 foot-pounds of torque. There's an infinity roof with removable panels. So essentially you're getting a very Jeep Wrangler-esque experience. You can remove the roof panels. And there's storage up front for you to place said roof panels. Available Super Cruise, which is the Cadillac technology that allows hands-free driving with automatic lane changing on compatible roads. 4-wheel steering. Full underbody armor for extreme off-road capabilities, and 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. When they call this thing a super truck, they know exactly what they're talking about. Now, I have to put it into perspective for you all here. This is something of a revolutionary vehicle, and really all of these cars were revolutionary in some way, shape, or form, dating all the way back to the 1886 Benz Patent motor wagon. That was the most influential car of its time period because it was the first car ever made. Without that, there would be no cars. If that had not happened, we could be living in a world in which there were no cars. Somebody else thought of something other than a car to transport people around. Then you had the 1890s with the Jury motor wagon, which started the American car market, which the second largest car market on earth and arguably the most influential. And then you had the 1900s, the Ford Model T. Enough said. The 1910s, the Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost, largely regarded as the beginning of precision engineering in cars. And not only the beginning of precision engineering in cars, the best car in the world for several decades. Not just the 1910s. Because even then, cars in the 20s, 30s, even 40s, they were still using these Rolls-Royce Silver Ghosts in Army applications, in other things, because of how simple they were and how reliable they were. And we're talking about, 20, 30 years after these vehicles were made. You had the 1920s, the Duesenberg Model J, largely regarded as one of the first supercars, if I can even put it that way. The 1930s, the Chrysler Airflow, the first aerodynamically designed car. The 1940s, the Volkswagen Beetle, enough said. The 1950s, the Citroën DS, first car to use four-wheel disc brakes. First car to have hydropneumatic suspension. First car to have so many modern features that we just take for granted these days. Then you had the 1960s. You had the 1960s, which, if I can think off the top of my head, the Lamborghini Miura. First mid-engined car ever made. And then you had the 1970s, the AMC Gremlin. The AMC Pacer. One of the first American economy cars. The 1980s, the Chrysler minivans transformed the way that families would move for the next several decades. Even today, 40 years later, people are still buying brand new minivans to haul their families around. You had the most influential car of the 90s, the McLaren F1. Still the fastest naturally aspirated supercar ever made. And this thing is 30 years old. You had the 2000s, the Pontiac Aztek, one of the first successful crossovers ever made. And granted, not as successful as they were wanting it to be, but fairly successful in its own right. Especially compared to its cousin, the Buick Rendezvous. And then you had the 2010s, the Tesla Model S. The first practical, luxurious electric car. And then now you have the 2020s. You see what I'm trying to get here? The reason why I started this series of podcasts, not just because we started on Instagram, but it's to show you how revolutionary each of these cars were for their time period and how they shaped the future of cars. And this is what I predict. I'm not a scholar. I'm not, a person who studied marketing. Well, actually, I guess I did study marketing. I studied mass communications. Marketing is part of that. But I'm not someone who studied business. I'm not one who studied the car market intricately. But as a lay person as I am, I know more about cars than the average person. I will give it that. But I'm not Lee Iacocca, let's say. As a lay person as I am, who's never worked in the automotive industry, I predict that the GMC Hummer EV and vehicles of the like will be the driving force in the 2020s. Think of it. Car markets all across the world are leaning more and more towards crossovers. In America, we're leaning more and more towards crossovers, SUVs, and trucks. The sedan is slowly but surely falling out of fashion. The station wagon is almost dead. The minivan still exists, but people are moving more and more towards crossovers as the do-all, be-all, and end-all of all vehicles. Crossovers can do car things, they can do mild truck things, they can do SUV things, they can do minivan things, depending on the crossover you get. You could have a crossover as extreme as the Lamborghini Urus, which is basically a supercar masquerading as a crossover. You could have a Subaru Outback, which is a station wagon masquerading as a crossover. You could have things like, the Kia Soul, which is an economy car masquerading as a crossover. I mean, there's so many different levels of crossover that you can have here. And that suit everybody to all their needs that they're going to need. And now you have GMC's Hummer EV, The GMC Hummer EV is in that same vein of vehicles as far as a crossover goes. Even though it's truck-based, but it's hearkening to that same market share that has been growing and growing and growing. Larger vehicles, crossovers, pickup trucks, and SUVs. It is catering to that market in a very pointed manner. It is getting there more successfully than Tesla, and it's going to get there, and I predict it will outsell Tesla. Because it is the first one who's giving a realistic product. The Tesla Cybertruck, I don't care how many fanboys there are out there. The Tesla Cybertruck is not realistic. It is not. It's hideous. People are not going to want to buy it. It is not as capable as the Hummer EV. And plus, it comes from Tesla. So you know quality issues are going to be rife. And you know that there is not going to be much of a dealer network that's going to be able to help you if and when it gives a problem. Because as reliable as electric cars have proved to be, they still give issues. Just like all vehicles give issues. You don't have a reliable service network for a Tesla vehicle as you would with a GMC vehicle. This is what I'm beginning to say. This is going to be the beginning of the end for manufacturers, boutique manufacturers like Tesla when it comes to the electric car market. They're not going to be able to keep up. Because now that GM is going to be coming out with the Hummer EV, guess what Ford's going to start doing? Ford's going to start putting their own electric, pickup truck into the works. And not only that, GM has announced that they're going to be making a fully electric vehicle version of the Chevy Silverado, which is one of the 3 traditional American pickups. You can get a Ford F-150, a Ram, or a Chevy Silverado. Those are the 3 traditional American pickup trucks. And one of them is going to have a fully electric version announced as of yesterday. What you going to do? What you going to do, Tesla? You can't keep up. This is why I think GM being the first one on the scene in this market, in this market segment that they have really carved out of a demand. People are demanding more pickup trucks and SUVs and crossovers, and they're also demanding more electric vehicles. Boom, they met the people where they needed them. And now you have it. You have the GMC Hummer EV. So please stay tuned for the next segment, folks, in which I'm going to be discussing essentially why it's going to be so influential and comparing it to a traditional truck to see how it stands up. So please stay tuned for the next segment.
Are you a business owner? Someone interested in the latest news that might affect your business? Then check out the GSMC Business News Podcast, a show dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning business, technology, and the stock market. Get a head start on the day as we keep you updated on the latest goings-on Wall Street, money, jobs, and technology. The GSMC Business News Podcast has you covered.
Okay, so we have discussed the, what was I saying? We have discussed the history of the GMC Hummer EV. We've discussed, it's how it got to the market and other things of that sort and what it's going to be doing once it actually gets into production. Now, I want to welcome you back to segment 2, in which we are going to be discussing why the GMC Hummer EV will be so influential. Oh, and not to mention, not only will it be offered in a pickup truck version, it's also coming as an SUV. So, even more competitors that are waiting to just be crushed by the GMC Hummer EV. So, even though most new vehicles today that are sold are crossovers, most EVs are still car-based platforms with no off-road capability. Think of all of Tesla's lineup. The Model S, a sedan. The Model Y, a crossover. The Roadster, a sports car. The Model 3, a sedan. The Model X, another crossover. Think of that. They have not come out with the Cybertruck yet, and really there is not a straight answer from Tesla as to when their Cybertruck is actually going to be coming out. Because if you look up anything about Tesla and Elon Musk, they are notoriously flaky. They will say something's coming out then they push it back, then they push it back again, and then by the third or fourth time they've pushed it back, that's when they finally come out with it. So not only are they notoriously flaky, the vehicles that they have right now, once GM begins to put this thing into production this year, because you know it's going to be this year, pandemic or not, they already have a semi-functioning prototype that they gave to Doug DeMuro to review. So, like, the real thing is coming very quickly and very soon. So now, you think of the most successful electric car maker right now is Tesla, and they have no off-road capability and no real truck of any sort of imagination in their lineup in a market like the American market, which is increasingly demanding trucks and SUVs and off-road vehicles. Because Tesla's crossovers are just large cars. They're not really anything but large cars. They don't have much as far as ground clearance goes, and they have no off-road capability whatsoever. They're not meant for that. So now you're going to be thinking of it. People had long been saying, oh, Tesla's got it in the bag, blah, blah, blah. People thought I was crazy. I was like, nah, Tesla has nothing. Tesla's a fad. Because once GM, Ford, Toyota, Honda, Volkswagen, all of those very large automakers start coming out with electric vehicles to rival Tesla, Tesla's going to go bye-bye like that. They're either going to be bought out or they're going to go under. This is the beginning of the end. This is the beginning of the end. And I don't want to just sound doom and gloom, but all of those are car-based. Now think of it this way. You've got a market in which cars are dying, and then the most successful electric vehicle manufacturer is making what are essentially all cars. People are beginning to have to make a choice. Do they want a crossover that is somewhat off-road capable, or do they want an electric vehicle? They haven't been able to really have both. Yes, Tesla has a Model X. Yes, they have a Model Y. I'm not discounting the existence of the Tesla X and the Tesla Model Y. But if you look sheerly on the roads, most electric vehicles are not Model X's or Model Ys. Let's just put it that way. Most of them aren't. And most of the crossovers that you do see are at least somewhat off-road capable. The RAV4, there's a TRD version of the RAV4, I'm pretty sure. And if it's not a TRD version, there's off-road trims to the RAV4. And the RAV4 is an extremely successful crossover. And it's probably one of the first crossovers, debuting way back in 1994. The RAV4 has been extremely successful. You have other things, offerings by GM, offerings by Ford, that are somewhat off-road capable, that you can take on a dirt trail. You can, rough up a bit and not, be afraid. I've seen people off-road their Ford Flexes. Let's just put it that way. I've seen people off-road a Ford Flex and be actually successful at doing so. So you got all these crossovers out there that are actually able to handle some light off-roading, and then you've got Tesla's electric vehicle crossovers that are just basically blown up sedans. You're going to get to a point where people are going to start demanding electric off-road vehicles. And before people even start demanding it, GM was like, you're welcome. This is the answer to the question that you didn't know you even had. They have acted in a proactive approach instead of a reactive approach. And that's what you have to do when you are a car manufacturer in such a highly technologically advanced market, and not only highly technologically advanced, highly competitive market. You're not dealing with Soviet Russia here, in which you could have one manufacturer of vehicles and they make one or two vehicles and that's it. Everybody has to be satisfied with it. And if you look at the way the electric car market is right now, that's basically how it is. There's one viable brand out there that's making everything that everybody kind of wants, and that's Tesla. When it comes to electric vehicles, they make a sports car, they make two sedans and two crossovers. That's Tesla. But because Tesla is all the same company, led by the same guy who doesn't really delegate the work out to other different people, who really doesn't have a hierarchy going on, he's got one California factory that's making all of the vehicles. They've got no dealer network. They do everything themselves. They're trying to be self-sustaining and self-contained, and they're rapidly beginning to regret it. And if not regretting it, they're rapidly feeling the effects of it. You get that. In a market as competitive as the United States, you might have your heyday for a few years. But at the end of the day, slow and steady wins the race. Elon Musk is like the hare, and then all the other car manufacturers are like the tortoise. The hare thought he was going to beat the tortoise, so he goes hopping along all over God's creation goodness. Then he gets tired and takes a break. Well, his break happened to be too long because the tortoise, who had been calculating all along, who had been saying, you know what, we're going to let Tesla have his heyday, but Tesla's going to get to a point where he's going to need to take a break. And then while he's slowing down and while he's stopped, that's when we're going to overtake him. And then by the time he wakes up, he's going to lose because we're already at the finish line. That's exactly what all the other manufacturers, especially GM, are doing to Tesla right now. They're just baiting Tesla. They'll be like, yeah, we're going to take a while. And Tesla's like, yeah, sales, this, that, autonomous vehicles, this, autonomous vehicles, that, technology, play games in your car, no. All this different fad foolishness. And then you got GM. GM, one of the largest car manufacturers on earth, save for maybe the Volkswagen Auto Group. They're coming out with something that the people didn't even know they wanted. That's what you call running a car business. You create a segment and make the people want the car when you introduce the car to them. Not something like the Tesla Cybertruck that looks like it's been designed by a 5-year-old and frankly is grossly unrealistic. You come out with something like the GMC Hummer EV, and people actually want it, and you're going to get traditionalists like me looking at it and being like, you know what? If I'm going to buy electric, it's going to be that. That's what Tesla needs to be doing, and Tesla's not doing that. So even though I gave them the title of most influential vehicle of the 2010s, I believe that's the last time they're going to get on that list. The 2020s, the 2030s, the 2040s, and the 2050s, the rest of this century, Tesla's not going to have any influential vehicle after that. Everybody else is going to be catching up. So, Tesla's plans for the Cybertruck have been announced. This is true. The GMC Hummer EV is much farther along in production and development and is a lot more capable. The GMC Hummer EV will not only usher in a new class of vehicle called the supertruck, it will be the first viable entry into the electric truck market. Some people don't like EVs because they prefer trucks for utility and off-road use. Until this truck came along in this decade. If one wanted a proper truck to haul with, gas and diesel were the only options. The GMC Hummer, as well as its class of super trucks that will inevitably spawn from competitors, will give traditional trucks a run for their money. Let me summarize that because that's what I wrote down. Now let me explain it to you. I asked my girlfriend to ask her family because, just to preface a bit into my personal life here, My girlfriend's from Tennessee. She has 7 brothers, all of which are very fond truck owners who do construction, who do agricultural work, who do anything of that sort that's going to require a truck. All right. So I asked them, and they all basically said that utility was the reason why they had their trucks. And that's why they enjoyed them so much, and that's why they liked them. Now get this. The truck owners are all crying for utility. They're all crying for hauling, load capacity, payload, blah, 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 all of these buzzwords that matter to truck owners. Now you have the GMC Hummer EV. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of philosophy here. The GMC Hummer EV and its competitors, or its lack thereof, if I could put it that way, comes as a result of a car company choosing to buck the trend of what the traditionalists want and forcibly looking towards the future and putting a product out there that the future will thank them for. The people who own trucks tend to be one of 3 things. They tend to be conservative, they tend to be blue collar, and they tend to be American. The people who own trucks. I'm not saying that you can't be an immigrant who owns a truck. I can't be saying that you can't be a professional that owns a truck. And I can't say you can't be a doctor that owns a truck. But typically, the truck buyer is an American conservative blue collar worker, in which there are tons of them. That is a large portion of our population. These people are concerned for their pocketbooks, they're concerned for their freedoms, and they're concerned with the utility of their trucks. How much money is the truck going to save them? How much money are they going to get out of using the truck? And how much money is it going to generate for them in their line of work, essentially? So now you take all of those concerns. Now you have to see how the GMC Hummer EV stacks up to this. And I'm sorry, folks, this segment is going to go on longer than 15 minutes, but I really have to get into the nitty-gritty of this. It's a question of philosophy. So now you see all of those things that they're concerned with. And it makes sense why these people are resistant to the change that is happening and resistant to the inevitable change that is happening not only in the car market, but in the society. Because you're getting to a point, especially in places like California, which, granted, the majority of those people that I just mentioned don't live in California, but there are some of them in California. You get places like California, which you know are already strict on emissions. They're only going to get more and more strict, and they're going to get to a point where I predict they might even say, if a car is not electric, it's not allowed to be sold in California. They might even get to that point. What are you going to do for the people who live over there? What are you going to do for the people who realize that, hey, they've got a buddy that has an electric car and the electric car doesn't break down? The electric car is super easy to service, and the electric car has a lot less moving parts, therefore a lot more durability. What are they going to see when they start seeing that the electric cars are becoming more and more viable? The reason why these people are not flocking towards electric cars right now is because they believe in gas, they believe in fossil fuels, they believe in sheer utility, and they believe in brute force. They believe in hardworking, they believe in utility from their vehicles. And when you look at it, all of the electric cars that are currently being built right now at this moment are all not capable of doing what these people need. They need cars that are going to haul bales of hay. They need cars that are going to be towing that are going to be towing trailers with horses and other sorts of building materials and other things of that sort. They're going to need vehicles that are actually capable of working for them. Because the modern man's plow horse is his pickup truck. The plow horse pulled your plow, it pulled your wagon, it pulled your building materials, it pulled everything you needed it to pull. The modern day horse is the pickup truck. So you're going to have the pickup truck. You need a pickup truck that is capable to do anything you throw at it. And this is why they stick to things like Ford, they stick to things like Ram, and they stick to things like Chevy or GMC. Because those are the ones who have perfected the art of the truck. Well, now GM comes along and turns the truck market on its head with this GMC Hummer EV. People are going to be like, whoa, you're going to get the California dudes who love anything that's technological. And they'll be like, dude, we're going to get to this. Then you're going to start seeing these people start driving these around. And then you're going to start seeing that they're saving money on fuel. You're going to start seeing that they're saving money on maintenance. They don't have to change oil. They don't have an engine. You're going to see that they're saving money on a bunch of other things. Even though they spent a lump sum of money at first to get it, they're going to save a bunch of money in the long run when they realize they don't have to deal with fancy diesel particulate systems that are going to fail because modern day diesels have a lot of emissions things with them. And the diesel, if you're going to get a truck to work, goodness, you have to get the diesel model. The diesel model is the most fuel efficient, the most torque, and the most powerful. So now you're getting the ones, now you're getting really into the nitty-gritty, into the science of trucks. You're going to get the diesel trucks that are going to be pumped full of this modern technology that's going to cause them to break anyway. Because that much technology, that many moving parts, that many systems to monitor, when you have particulate filters and you've got emissions regulations and blah, 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 this, and that, all of that with a diesel truck, which is basically the most capable version of a truck, you're going to get that. Or you can have peace of mind with an electric vehicle. That all you have to do is routine maintenance of their electric motors, which are pretty much simple to put together, simple to take apart, and simple to service. And you might have to change batteries every now and then. That's something you are going to have to do to a traditional truck anyway, change your battery and service the motor. So now you have this alternative. Will these traditional blue-collar American workers flock to GM dealerships in droves and go buy these things? Not at first. Not at first. It might take a while, but you will slowly see them. And I believe it's going to be a geographical distribution. You will see the ones in the states that are less conservative that are going to start really cracking down on emissions, in which they're not going to be able to roll coal with their trucks anymore, which is, throwing a bunch of black smoke out of the diesel, trucks. They're not going to be able to do that anymore. The ones who live in the places like New York, California, all those other places that are a bit more liberal, that are going to start really cracking down on environmental regulations, they're going to be the first ones to cave. Once they start seeing their trucks are racking up a bunch of miles, it's costing too much to keep them on the road, they're going to be the first ones to cave. And by that time, GM is going to obviously come out with more variations of their electric pickup trucks. It may not necessarily be the Hummer EV, but they're going to come out because, like I said, yesterday they announced the Silverado is going to be coming in an all-electric version. Now, you announced that the Silverado is going to be coming in an all-electric version. That's a traditional pickup truck that tons of these guys have. That's even smarter for GM because they realize, hey, you know what? They may not fall for the lifestyle truck sort of thing. They might just want a traditional truck that's electric and doesn't have all the headaches associated with gas vehicles. So now they get to either GMC Hummer EV or Chevy Silverado EV. They get to that. And then as they begin to read testimonials, they begin to see people, they begin to know people who have these things and begin to see them more often. Then you're going to get the ones in the more conservative areas when their trucks begin to rack up a bunch of miles and they realize that they're spending more money keeping the trucks on the road than they would if they were to just buy another truck. Then they're going to start going for the electric vehicle foolishness. They might always have a traditional truck to keep around in case if the electric vehicle breaks. And because, frankly, when you're that traditional and that conservative in your mindset, you probably will never fully trust an electric vehicle, especially when you rely on your vehicle for your living. But they will realize that it's a lot cheaper to run an electric vehicle than it is to run a gas vehicle. And then because one of their paramount focuses is on their money, how much money they're going to save, and how profitable their businesses are going to be, even if they don't have one for personal use, you will start seeing that they will switch slowly but surely to electric vehicles for their work vehicles. And then that's how GM is going to get them. That's how they're going to get them. That's how you're going to get some people to purchase Hummer EVs. That's how you're going to get people to purchase some Silverado EVs. That's how you're going to get them, because you have to target what they care about most. And you're going to target their money and their pocketbooks, because you're going to see that it is cheaper to run an electric vehicle than it is to be a gas vehicle. And these people, they're not concerned with style. They're not concerned with prestige. They're concerned with money and profitability of their hardworking businesses. They're entrepreneurs. They are self-made people, the true American dream. These people are who's living it. These blue-collar, conservative American workers. And those are the people you're going to need to start buying this vehicle. Those are the people you're going to need to begin to slowly but surely encroach and start targeting, in order for you to really flip the electric car, or to flip the truck market on its head. And GM is beginning to do that. I'm going to tell you how they're beginning to do that. We're going to discuss some specifications here. The Hummer EV2 with a 250-plus mile range. And that's, the EV2 is the bottom of the barrel as far as the Hummer EVs go. This is the least capable version, and here are its specs. The Super Cruise driver assistance, which I've already explained that to you. All-terrain tires, 625 horsepower, 7,400 foot-pounds of torque. Get that? 7,400 foot-pounds of torque. A 5-foot bed that can be extended up to 6 foot 10 inches. And if you're willing to pay more money, the more expensive editions have more capability. Now let's compare this to a Ford F-250 Limited. The Ford F-250 Limited with the off-road package is $86,675. This Hummer EV2 that I just mentioned, $79,995, about $7,000 cheaper. And now you've got the Ford F-250 Limited with 475 horsepower, about 150 less horsepower, with 1,050 pound-feet of torque, not even close. And we're talking about the diesel engine here, folks, not even remotely close to the 7,400 pound-feet of torque that the Hummer EV2 is going to have. And you know, when you're towing, torque is what matters. It's not horsepower, it's torque. That's pulling power. So theoretically, the Hummer EV2 will be able to pull infinitely more than one of these trucks will. And it has 4x4 capability. We're talking about the F-250 Limited here. And it's got a 6 3/4 foot bed length. The biggest problem that would have been for the Hummer EV is probably the fact that it comes with only a 5-foot bed. And that's not even such an issue, because it could extend up to 6 feet and 10 inches long, which is just about the length of a traditional pickup truck bed that comes in a standard size. This thing not only will be able to do all the work, and it will have all the fun, because it will be convertible, it will be off-road, it will be this, it will be that. So the writing is on the wall, folks. If anybody looks at the Hummer EV objectively and says that it is not better than a Ford F-250 Limited, they're lying. I have to put it that way. They are simply lying, and they are simply refusing to acknowledge the truth. I'm a traditionalist, but I have to give credit where credit is due. If I'm going to buy a pickup truck, and I'm looking as far as sheer all-around practicality, the Hummer EV is really hard to beat. Not saying that there isn't one out there that beats it, but it is extremely difficult to beat. So this segment has been really long, So the other segments, I'm going to try to shorten them to accommodate this. So please bear with me. But there you have it. Those are the specifications of the Hummer EV and why it's going to be so practical. So please stay tuned for the next segment in which I'm going to be discussing some historical things that have happened so far in this decade, as well as some other influential vehicles. So please stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Okay, welcome back, folks, to segment 3. So you've heard the overview of the Hummer EV, basically in those 2 super long last segments. Okay, here are some other influential vehicles of our time. You've got the Tesla Cybertruck. You've got, I should explain to you about the Tesla Cybertruck first. The Tesla Cybertruck. Tesla's future prospect for the pickup truck market. Controversial styling. I've already put it out there. Not as capable as the Hummer EV all around. Perhaps has more towing power, but that's because the numbers for towing haven't come out yet for the Hummer EV. And then you've got the 2021 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited Rubicon 392. It is Jeep's first Wrangler to have a V8. A Hemi with 470 horsepower. So Chrysler is still doing the big power thing, big naturally aspirated vehicles. We'll see how long that lasts for Chrysler, because they're planning on making, I don't know if this was a joke, but I honestly knowing Chrysler probably isn't a joke. They're planning on making a Hellcat-powered Chrysler Pacifica. They've already put a V8 in a Jeep Wrangler. They're really running out of things to put a V8 into. Yeah, Chrysler and Dodge and Ram and Jeep, that whole lot, they are sinking rapidly. Stellantis is here. Hopefully that will be their saving grace. But by the time they start revolutionizing these brands, if they so choose to do so, and not just get rid of them or consolidate them into one brand anyway, because at this point they're practically one brand. I mean, Dodge is almost nothing. Chrysler is almost nothing. Jeep is really what's pulling the game together. And, yeah. So by the time this happens, that Stellantis actually starts doing something, they might just all consolidate those into one group, or keep Jeep, Dodge, and Ram and just incorporate them into Jeep, or keep Ram separately and incorporate Dodge into that, and then just get rid of Chrysler altogether. They might just, they are basically 4 brands right now. They are Jeep, they are Ram, they are Chrysler, and they are Dodge. They might just consolidate those into 2 brands. One for trucks and one for SUVs, which would be Jeeps. And they might just get rid of the cars altogether. And the minivan, I don't even know. Honestly, I don't even know at this point. Chrysler's not doing well. Volvo. The Volvo Polestars. This is a series of electric vehicles that Volvo has been coming out with. Doug DeMuro has more on this. Volvo has pledged to be all electric by 2025. They are aiming their Polestar series squarely at Tesla, which, like I said, the beginning of the end of Tesla's, this is not the beginning of the end. The beginning of the end for Tesla, but the beginning of Tesla's tide of competition. What's going to happen is that vehicle manufacturers that have a lot more experience than Elon Musk, that have a lot more resources than Elon Musk, that have a lot more brand loyalty than Elon Musk, that have a lot more things than Elon Musk, slowly but surely, they will start coming out with EVs that are better looking and have a greater brand following and are of better quality. And they will slowly but surely overtake Tesla. Because here we are. I have to discuss the Polestar for a bit. The Polestar 2 recently came out, and Doug DeMuro did a video on it. And he said that the Polestar 2, even though it's better looking than Tesla, as far as their Model 3 goes, it's not a better electric vehicle. And he cited reasons of performance, mostly, and range, in which I have to give it to him. I have to give it to him. The range is what really got me. The range is not as big, or is not as large, or is not as long, however you want to describe the length of range, is not as capable as Tesla's Model 3. Performance numbers at that point, though, performance numbers don't really matter. And I'm going to tell you the reason why performance numbers don't really matter. Because when you take the layperson who's been driving, 5, 10, 15-year-old Toyota Camry that's finally beginning to, give more problems than it's worth fixing because they haven't taken care of it much, and they're finally in that job that they know they're going to be able to afford an electric vehicle. When you take those people, who will most likely be the people who are buying the likes of the Tesla Model 3, the people who want to take a chance on an electric vehicle and who finally have the money to do it, when you take the likes of those people, you're not going to have them concerned about things like performance in 0 to 60 times. Those people will hardly be concerned with any of that. And the reason why they will hardly be concerned with any of that is because they're not car enthusiasts. The people who are going to be buying Teslas, the people who are going to be buying Volvo Polestars, are the people who need a commuter vehicle but who are making enough money to try out an electric vehicle, who are making enough money to try out something a bit different, a bit nicer than the regular Honda Accord, Toyota Camry, Ford Fusion, things of that sort, those buzzwords as far as commuter mid-size sedans go. So now, what's going to happen to people like Tesla? Tesla is not going to be able to appeal to these people so much so anymore when the brands that they have always known and loved are going to start coming out with competitors. Yes, for right now, Tesla is still probably the way to go. But you have to consider, Volvo is pledging to be all electric by 2025, which means that Volvo is going to be making more and more and more electric vehicles between now and the time they're pledging to be all electric by. So right now they're just dipping their toe in the water of electric vehicles. But they haven't really fully gone all in yet. Once they fully go all in, you think they're going to settle for the Polestar 2? They're not going to settle for the Polestar 2. That's not going to be their cash cow. That's their experiment. The Polestar 1 wasn't fully electric. It was hybrid. The Polestar 2 is their first fully electric vehicle. They're just dipping their toes. And that's Volvo. Volkswagen is going to start doing it sooner rather than later. BMW has already experimented with some hybrid vehicles, and they're going to begin to have plans for all electric vehicles. GM is already doing it as far as trucks go. All the people right now who are doing these things, they're just dipping their toes into the water of electric vehicles. They're having hybrid vehicles that are more electric-based than they are gas-based. Eventually, they're going to start having fully electric vehicles. They're dipping their toes in the water of electric vehicles. And how I know that they're dipping their toes is because they haven't gone all in. They haven't gone all in. And which is good, because they're seeing how people are reacting to it. They're seeing if any quality issues arise, how they plan on solving it with the latest edition. How they plan on making it as good as possible before they start making an electric vehicle that will really bring the cash home. That's how it ought to be done. That's exactly what Volvo's doing. Volvo's just dipping its toe into the water. Yes, the Volvo Polestar 2, the most viable competitor is the Tesla Model 3. The Tesla Model 3 will probably way outsell the Volvo Polestar 2. But think of the future. The Polestar 3, the Polestar 4, the Polestar 5, Polestar 6, and so on. Those are going to be the ones that Tesla is going to have a hard time outselling. Because Volvo at that time period is going to be like, hey, I got the hang of this, I can do this. They don't have the hang of it just yet. And the same thing goes with all of the other vehicles out there, all of the other vehicle manufacturers that are going to start putting into electric cars. So now get this. That's Volvo Polestar. The Chevy Silverado EV just announced yesterday on April 6, 2021. 400 miles of range. The first traditional pickup truck to have an electric variant. That is huge. Because back to what I ranted and raved about in the previous segment before this. Here you have a little issue here. You have the issue of that the people who mostly buy trucks are the people who are also the most resistant to change. But eventually, you're going to get these people who are the most resistant to change. They're going to have to change out of necessity because they're not going to be able to continue paying gas money for their diesel or their gas trucks and continue making repairs that all internal combustion engines are eventually going to need anyway. Especially that those vehicles are worked very hard. They're not going to be able to continue out of sheer hubris in order to do that. Hubris meaning pride. Out of sheer pride, they're not going to be able to continue doing that. Because at the end of the day, these people are entrepreneurs. They have their own businesses. They rely on their self-sustaining willpower in order to make a living. And they're going to want to make money where money can be made. And they're going to want to save money where money can be saved. And where can they save money? They're going to be able to save money in buying an electric truck. So now, let's say the Hummer EV is too much like a Jeep Wrangler for them. You got the Chevy Silverado EV that GM is going to start putting into production. Is going to start developing. And I can tell you, probably within 2022, they might already have a fully functioning version ready to go out to market. Just give them a year, because they've already got the platform. All they have to do is electrify it. So now, what are you going to do now? Their electric trucks that have been there, that they didn't like, they finally get one that's built off of the truck they perhaps own. If that truck has been a very good truck for them, but then the truck is starting to begin to get maintenance, it's going to need to have maintenance to be done on it. Gosh, that was difficult to say. When it's going to start needing maintenance, what are they going to do? They can continue dumping money into it out of pride, out of necessity, or they're like, I can't get rid of it yet. But when that thing gets to be 10, 15 years old, and their option is to continue buying continue putting money into a 10, 15-year-old truck, buy one that's used that probably has 200,000 miles on it, or buy a brand new one that is built off of the same platform as the old one was, you might buy a brand new one. You might buy a brand new electric vehicle just to try it out. Because you know how much money it's going to save you in the long run. That's the Chevy Silverado EV. Who the Hummer EV won't get, the Chevy Silverado EV will definitely get. Is GM being smart? GM is being extremely smart. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a GM guy. I'm saying that because everybody else is lollygagging. And they are getting to a point where they are beginning to be extremely intelligent, and they're going to start becoming extremely profitable lest somebody steps up and does something. Moving on. we're going to take a look at the history of this, this decade so far. Granted, we're only 2 years in. We've done 2020. Now we're in 2021. We haven't done much of the 2020s just yet, but here's some historical events that have happened so far. The COVID-19 pandemic from March 2020 to the present has killed millions of people across the world, hundreds of thousands of Americans, probably, as of the recording of this podcast, close to 600,000 Americans, if not even more. As many Americans that died in the Civil War, the bloodiest conflict that our country has ever partaken in. The vaccines are in the rollout. Right now, we've got 3 vaccines that are approved by the FDA for emergency use. You've got the Pfizer vaccine, you've got the Moderna vaccine, and you've got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Right now, I can say, because I work in the news, Southwest Florida has about 1/3 of its population just about that has been fully vaccinated. And Florida, as of April 5th, 2021, has opened up vaccine eligibility to anybody who is over 16 years of age. That is for the Pfizer vaccine, and anybody who's over 18 years of age for all of the vaccines. So vaccination is underway, and Joe Biden is hoping by April 19th, all Americans over the age of 16 will be able to be eligible for at least one of the 3 vaccines. So the fight against COVID is an honorable one. It is continuing on, and that is something that our decade will definitely be marked by, because just because we have vaccines doesn't mean life is going to return to normal just yet. The Capitol attack, January 6th, 2021. Basically, I'm going to call it how it is. I'm not making a political statement, but essentially Donald Trump incited his followers to lead a raid on the Capitol. They breached the Capitol grounds. 5 people died as a result of the Capitol breaching, I guess. Some police officers, some protesters died as a result. And it's still something that is still under investigation as we speak. One of probably the worst act of treason committed by American countrymen since the Civil War, and the first time that the Capitol has ever been attacked since the British attacked it back in the War of 1812. So there you have it. The Mars rover is on Mars currently as we speak, as of the recording of this episode. I believe last week, the helicopter, like a specifically designed Mars rover helicopter, was sent over to Mars to be the first helicopter flight on a planet other than Earth. So that's pretty cool. Joe Biden is now the 46th president of the United States and the oldest president to ever serve office. Kamala Harris is the first Asian American and the first African American vice president and the first female vice president. So she's the first of a lot of things. Joe Biden's running mate, Kamala Harris. And yeah, there's a lot of history that is currently in the making as far as this decade goes, just to put it into perspective for you. So I'm going to try and squeeze out a last segment because I'm already at the hour mark, but I just really had to rant and rave about the GMC Hummer EV and how influential it's going to be. So I'm going to, please hold on to segment 4, in which I'm going to give you my thoughts, hopefully briefly, but I tend to be long-winded, so we'll see how long it lasts. But please stay tuned, folks.
Do you work in the world of marketing and advertising? Are you a media buyer or the owner of an agency? Have you been looking for a podcast to help stay on top of all the goings-on of those worlds? The GSMC Marketing News Podcast is dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning marketing and advertising. Get the latest marketing news, from what major businesses have planned for the coming year to the newest trends in advertising, from podcasts, digital and streaming, to the old standbys of radio, television, and billboards. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast has you covered, whether you're a marketing agent or a business trying to expand your brand.
Okay, welcome back, folks. So we finally reached segment 4 of what is probably the longest podcast that I've ever recorded, but probably one of the most important and probably one of the most relevant podcasts as well, which is my prediction of what the most influential class of vehicles will be for the 2020 decade. So let me tell you my thoughts. As a traditionalist, I weep. I have to. As much as I talk about how electric vehicles are the future, electric vehicles are more practical than internal combustion engines, electric vehicles this, electric vehicles that, as much as the media rants and raves about them, as much as people are wanting to switch over to fully electric, I'm sad. And it's just me. I'm a traditionalist. I have not owned a car that has been newer than 2009. And the car that I've owned the longest is a 2004 car. I have not owned anything that has been made after 2009, so I have not owned a 2010 or above car. So all of my cars that I have driven have been at least 12 years old as of now. And the one that I am currently driving is a 2004 model year, but it was built in 2003, so it's 18 years old. I'm a traditionalist. I don't like all the technology that's going into cars. To me, a car shouldn't be a computer. A car should be a car, and a computer should be a computer. Cars can have computers in them, but when you get into the point where the headquarters of the car company can hack into, well, not necessarily hack, because they're the ones who designed the system, can access the computer system of a car that is in a remote location and have it move or have it be alerted or can do whatever they feel like doing to it, that's at that point, that car is no longer just a car, it's a computer. And I don't believe cars should be computers. I don't believe that's what cars are meant for. Cars are meant for transportation. And I understand it would be highly unrealistic of me if everybody were to drive around in cars that were designed in the 90s. But to tell you the truth, I believe the 90s and the early 2000s was the best era for cars. There was enough technology to keep them safe, but not so much technology to make them horribly unreliable and impossible to work on. And this is where we're at. We're at that weird crossroads. We're at that weird crossroads in which cars that are still using traditional combustion engines are getting to the point where combustion engines are becoming smaller, more efficient, a lot of times with forced induction to squeeze as much power out of them as possible, and who have a lot of electric helpings, be it an electric motor like a hybrid or a lot of electrical systems to aid with the operation of the vehicle, to the point where, you know what, they're not too far off from their electric car counterparts. Then you've got the electric cars that have been around for just as long as gas cars, but the electric cars are finally coming into their own because the technology has advanced in such a way that they're becoming rapidly more and more practical and more convenient versus a gas car. And then you've got people like me. I am not thrilled for the electric car revolution that is going on. I'm not thrilled about it. I am a car purist. I'm a car historian. I am a car enthusiast. I like cars for being cars. I like cars that you can drive and hear an engine note, that you can be connected to the vehicle. I don't necessarily care for cars that you're super connected to the road, because I like luxury cars that kind of waft on top of the road and are connected to the road. But nonetheless, I still feel a connection to my machine. I feel like I am the one in control. I don't have lane keep assist. I don't have blind spot monitoring. I don't have a backup camera. I've got backup sensors, I will say that. But I don't have this stop and go technology. I don't have radar cruise control. I don't have semi-autonomous driving. I can't have an update come from GM over the internet to update my car if a new feature is added. I can't do that. My car is pretty darn analog. Now, people like me who appreciate the simplicity of older cars, we will get to a point where we will no longer be able to enjoy that unless we go to a museum. Because I will say, my car has more in common with a car from the 1980s than it does with a car from the present day. Because my car was designed in the mid-90s, not too far away from the 80s. That's kind of sad, and that's kind of concerning, because someone had said something about it. What happens to collectible cars? What happens to classic car culture? What happens to barn finds? All those things that us car enthusiasts hold near and dear to our hearts. When we get to be, the people who dominate that sort of stuff are, typically middle-aged men, 40 to 60-something, that dominate the classic car scene. What happens when people of my generation are 40 to 60-something and we're coming into that age where we've worked a lifetime, we are beginning to get into retirement, we want to really enjoy ourselves and do some things that we've always wanted to do. We want to buy an old classic car and repair it. So if someone of my dad's generation buys a classic car that reminds him of his youth, he's going to buy something from the 1980s because my dad was a teenager, a 20-something in the 1980s. He's going to buy something that reminds him of his youth so he can relive his glory days. What am I going to buy that reminds me of my youth? The car that I am driving now was designed before I was born. It wasn't built before I was born, but they've been making these Buick Park Avenues like that since late 96. I was born in late 97. What am I going to drive that reminds me of my youth? Oh, I'm going to find a Tesla somewhere in a barn and then hope to restore it. By that time, Tesla will most likely be out of business. They didn't already have a good dealership network now, so their dealership network is going to be non-existent by the time I'm 60 years old in 40-something years. So, what am I going to do? Am I going to find a car? Because I'm going to be 60. I'm just going to put it out there. I turned 20 in 2017. I'm going to be 60 in, if I can do math properly, in 2057, I'm going to be 60. So am I going to buy a car from the 1990s that's going to be 60-something years old? Maybe. But those cars are going to be harder and harder to find. So if I'm going to buy a classic car, and not just me personally, but people of my generation, we're going to buy a classic car. We're going to get the likes of Ford Fusion hybrids. We're going to get the likes of Tesla Model 3s. We're going to get the likes of Chevy Equinoxes. We're going to get the likes of maybe a Toyota Avalon. If we're talking about normal cars, that's what we're going to get the likes of. And even if we were to get a sports car from that time period, something that's considered more collectible, you're still going to have a bunch of electric foolishness that you're going to have to deal with. A bunch of dealer-specific things to the point where you can't work on it and restore it yourself. That's what's kind of sad. Because what about the people who are going to be buying cars that are going to be competing in the Concours d'Elegance? Let's say in 2057, when I'm 60, the Gasparilla Concours d'Elegance that happens in Tampa Bay. Or the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance that happens way out in California. Those people are going to buy Teslas. Like, this is the first Tesla Model S ever made. They're going to buy. How on earth are those people going to hope to restore those things? They're going to be out in barns, exposed to the elements like barn finds typically are. They're going to be rusting and corroding away. All of that wiring for the electric foolishness is going to be shot. Their screens are going to be cracked, gone to black. They're not going to be connected to the internet, or at least if they're going to be connected to the internet, they're going to be connected to an extremely old version of the internet that only specific computers can work on them. It's going to get to a point where the collector car culture is going to change drastically and is going to die as we know it. And that makes me sad. So as much as I like the GMC Hummer EV, to tell you the truth, I wish there were a way to keep cars traditional. But the writing is on the wall. we are at the tide. We're at the turning of the tide, in which the tide is turning in favor of electric vehicles. It is not turning in favor of internal combustion vehicles, such as gas or diesel. It is not turning in favor of that. Not only that, you're starting to get big old car companies that are pledging to be electric by a certain time period. So now, whether I like it or not, in my lifetime, I'm going to have to cave and buy an electric vehicle, because as much as I would like to keep my Buick Park Avenue forever, my Buick Park Avenue is not going to last forever. Will I be the last owner of it? Absolutely. After I'm done with it, it's going to the junkyard. I'm going to drive it till the wheels fall off. But I'm not going to be able to keep on driving that thing when I'm 60, because it's going to get to a point where you might get to a point where it's no longer practical to drive a vehicle like that, because there's no gas, or gas stations are few and far between, because everything's electric now. You could have it converted to electric, but it's never going to be as good as a brand new electric car dedicated for that. You're going to have these vehicles that are going to be designed as electric vehicles, engineered as electric vehicles, and serviced as electric vehicles by mechanics who are electricians, who work on electric vehicles and electric vehicles alone. It will get to a point, I predict, that if you're going to be driving a car, especially one as old as mine is, it's going to be like driving a Model T in modern day traffic. You can't just go to your Firestone and expect you have a full service done on your Model T. They're not trained to work on a car like that. They don't know how it works. Granted, that's how it is to own an electric car today. There's not really serviceable places for them unless you go to the dealer. But by the time I'm 60, you know what? I might very well get to a point, by the time I'm 60, my car will be around 60 years old as well. It might get to a point that I'm driving a 60-year-old car and nobody knows how to work on it anymore, because nobody works on traditional electric or combustion vehicles because they don't exist. It might get to that point till you're going to have to own an electric vehicle, and that makes me sad. The traditionalists will soon run out of valid arguments in favor of internal combustion. I have conceded to the fact several times that electric vehicles are more practical than gas vehicles, are going to be more reliable, and are definitely the way of the future. I've conceded that several times. David Christopher Lucy Mabel, has said that. And that's something I'm just going to have to grin and bear it. And not only that, I predict that the Hummer EV, this specific one, will do particularly well in places like California, where gas is super expensive and emissions are super strict. And cars of the like are going to do well, like in Europe as well. Europeans don't drive trucks nearly as much as Americans. But cars of that ilk, will do well over in Europe as well. Because gas is already expensive like that, and alternative energy is becoming more and more realistic over there. So there you have it. I have discussed in my longest podcast ever, at 1 hour and 15 minutes and counting, the entirety of what I believe is going to be the most influential car of the 2020s. The GMC Hummer EV. And if not the GMC Hummer EV, then an electric super truck very much like it, perhaps from a competitor. The most influential car of the 2020s. It's giving people what they want. They want alternative energy, and they want off-road capability, and they want a large vehicle that can haul a bunch of people. A GMC EV is what they need. So there you have it, folks. Please stay tuned for our next podcast, in which I'm going to be discussing some other podcast worthy material, some other car. Please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And thank you so much, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the GSMC Car Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type GSMC into your favorite podcast app to find all of the shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, from business news to weird news. Please subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed today's episode.